Okay, check. This is just a little pre-show things. Probably, again, isn't going to be much of a show lately. It's been hard to get guests on. But I want to test. I've finally got OBS monitoring going, and I want to see if that's working. I have the Restream chat going, so that's pretty cool. Let's see if it's... Doesn't look like I'm going. Oh, there we go. Video live. Okay. So... Okay. So I gotta try and remember how you can see the whole thing. So you go full screen, that doesn't work. Just click right on it. Yeah, that's how you do it. Okay, I'm just testing the Restream chat, and actually I want to know if sound's coming through. I don't hear anything. Let me, oh, yeah, I need to turn the phones up. Okay. Okay, so I should be hearing stuff. I see it here. 5. So 3. There we go. Okay, I should be hearing stuff now, and I am not. Why is that? Check. Okay, I'm hearing my monitoring. 1, 2. Okay. 2 is where I should be hearing. Why am I not hearing this? I see it. Oh, there's phone's volume. Check. Okay, looks like Facebook is working. So now I'm going to check the Restream chat. So here goes. Listing the relay. And that should have popped up on Facebook and YouTube. And there it goes. Okay, good. I'm actually not looking at YouTube right now. Let me just check YouTube real quick. My channel. I'm seeing me. Yep. Okay, I'm hearing it. And chat's working. Okay, great. This is awesome. Okay, now this stuff is finally doing what it's supposed to be doing. I'm going to be coming up in a little bit, and if you guys got any questions, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing a kind of a short one, just me talking about sample rates and bit depths. And my Facebook is still weird because of the situation over here. So I'm really not able to tell anybody that I'm doing this, which kind of sucks. But oh well. I guess you do what you can. Okay. I've got about 7 minutes of dead air to worry about in a second. Let me just cleaning everything up. So unless I hear anything else, I'm probably gonna be just talking about bit depth, because it's kind of a big thing to me. Let me see what I'm looking at now. Okay, looks good. Yeah, if anybody types anything in the chat, sorry. If anybody types anything on the chat, great. I will answer it. YouTube chat, Facebook chat. Not doing the stream, whatever. I don't know if I can do Discord. I think I can actually, but not gonna mess with that right now. Sorry. Next week I'll probably try and set up for that. So, let me see if there's anybody. Okay, I don't see anybody in the chat. Let's see, I wonder if I can I invite people? Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so as promised, I'm gonna start, and man, let me see if I can get this mic. I still got to get my mic thing set up right.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I thought I left something in here.
What do you need?
Oh no, I thought I left something in here, but it's fine.
Okay, so this is dropping in at Pipeline Audio number 26. If you have questions, just type it in on the YouTube or the Facebook, and allegedly the Restream Relay will send it to me. And I didn't have too much this week. Still trying to get some new guests on. But I did have, you know, and I know this stuff keeps coming up. You know, lots of times we'll kind of be going over the same thing. There's a lot of unsinkable rubber ducks. But we got a question from, let's see, it was in the bias group. Let me see if I can find it. So this is... So this is from Leon Padfield. Said, trying to get my head around, I'm assuming bit rates, spelled with B-U-T, but that's fine. Get it in the context, right? Trying to get my head around bit rates and sample rates. Is there any benefit to altering them? What are people using? First of all, commend this guy for being honest. So many people pretend they know so much stuff about, and they never admit that they might not know something about some kind of musical thing. But he did. He asked. So great. Like a lot of people say, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as I can. And, not knowing is just a chance to learn something. So, well, I said directly, and not sure. We'll see if anybody has anything to say about this. But I'll just read what I said and then can kind of go into it. So most of the stuff out there about this is purely religious in nature. And, okay, never mind, I'm breaking the fourth wall or whatever. What I mean by that is people read crazy things or believe crazy things and just generally parrot what they've heard. And they don't really have anything to back that up. As Peter Boghossian says, if I need to measure a door, I could take a tape measure or I could ask my dog. One of these is a reliable pathway to truth. And most of the time these people are talking about things that they don't really have any evidence for. But, it's the cool thing to say. Conformity's hard, And, if you ever meet audiophiles or read any of their stuff, in fact, I'll be pulling that up too. It's a thing about power cables, but it's no different than the speaker cables. And I keep getting sidetracked here, but let me get back to it. I just need to find. Sorry, where'd this thing go? Give me 2 seconds. Yep. Okay. So I'll be talking about that in a second as well. But here I go. I'm all sidetracked already. Okay, so what I had answered him, like I said, most of the stuff out there is purely religious in nature. In theory, 44.1 kilohertz can capture everything any human could hear. However, when sampling or converting analog to digital, you need to be 100,000% sure that nothing over half the sampling frequency reaches the conversion process. And that's, of course, because of aliasing problems, which I could get into in a little bit. Sorry. In our case, that leaves us only 2.05 kilohertz to do a low-pass filter. Is that right, or is it 1.025? Anyway, that's a really short case, and in this case, often called an anti-aliasing filter. Anti-aliasing filter. If you ever played around with a parametric EQ with a spectrum analyzer on it, like Re-EQ or Tone Booster's EQ4 or many others, you'll see that the steeper you make the filter, narrowing the bandwidth. Narrowing the bandwidth, it acts in, so like 24 decibels per octave rather than 3 decibels per octave. For instance, like a steep filter versus a shallow filter. It will start to boost right before the cut and usually has some phase issues. Sorry, really tired. We have the Aloha Jam today, so the Flatlanders from all over are riding today. I rode with them earlier today, so I'm a little bit wiped out. Sorry. While the religious argument for higher sample rates pretends that the higher sample rates allow us to hear some magical higher frequencies and all sorts of God of the gaps arguments like transient response or whatever you can try and say where this mythical oversampling thing is hiding out. The real benefit is in making the anti-aliasing filters much less steep. But the however to the however is that nowadays we have much better filter designs. I personally tend to work in 44.1 kilohertz, but don't mind 48 kilohertz. Early on, when RME first offered 96 kilohertz, me and Jimmy got some RME ADI DSs and ran two 9652 cards so that two ADAT, each ADAT cable would handle 4 channels of 96K. We ran that at 96K to really see how's this going to be, and we even got a special magical supernatural clock thing that clocked for the 96 kilohertz thing, and that's a whole nother argument. I think we talked about that before, but I'll be happy to go into again if you guys want. So we ran at 96K. I think this was back in like 2001 or whatever. But really, there was only drawbacks. Of course, processing, it took a whole lot more processing power and ate a whole lot of hard drive space. And back then, hard drives weren't so good. The one potential benefit, aside from the anti-aliasing filter to me, is that in theory, the minimum latency at any buffer size is going to be half for every doubling of the sample rate. Theoretically, there's some other things that, like safety buffers and everything that come into that. But the however to the however of that, however, is that now with really powerful computers, I have no issue getting the latency at 44 kilohertz down to where I want it. And parenthetically, again, sorry, I keep going through these. In reality, most people are not bothered if the actual round-trip latency is under 13 millisecond. And all the people you see running through iPads, like, running their amplitude or bias or whatever, are running with a bare minimum of 19 millisecond round-trip latency, and usually much more than that. I went through a bunch of iOS interfaces and checked the round-trip latency. The lowest that I could find was from the Sonoma Wireworks Studio Jack Mini and Guitar Jack Stage, and those were 19 milliseconds in Audio Bus 3 at the lowest latency settings I could get them. So this is way higher than anything you're going to get running on a PC, honestly. And people seem fine with that. So take that for what it's worth. I try and get it under 10 milliseconds. And I said a bare minimum of 19 milliseconds round trip latency, and usually much more than that. Funny how they pretend they can be bothered at 6 milliseconds in a DAW, but are fine with 24 milliseconds when they're playing through their iPads. One other benefit to higher sampling rates is that inside your DAW, nonlinear plugins like compressors or distortion will generate less aliasing effects at higher sampling rates. However, again, except for the crappiest of DAWs and plugins, most offer oversampling options in the plugins itself. So there's no benefit to actually recording at higher sample rates for this. And so, it's doing it inside the DAW, it's doing it inside the plugin. So, why bother storing it at 96 kilohertz? Most offer oversampling options, and so I said that. And for a quadruple, however, most people don't hear the aliasing errors from nonlinear effects even at 44 kilohertz. So that's something kind of important to think about, right? If nobody's going to hear it, you probably don't need to worry about it. Let's see. Sorry, I got to get back to this. Sorry, I gotta set this back up. And Dan Lavery said back in the day that ideally the ultimate sampling rate that we really want is about 60 kilohertz or something. You have plenty of room for an anti-aliasing filter, but 96 kilohertz is probably as close as you can get to that. I'm really not bothered. I've done a lot of ABX testing between 44 and 48 and 96, and I'm just not hearing the aliasing effects. That said, lots of converters are optimized for one sampling rate. Well, at least that's a claim that I've heard by people who I actually trust. I think Ian Shepard said that. So, they might have the best filters. One converter might have the best filters for 44K. One might be best at 48K, 96K, whatever. So that's probably something to think about. Take that for what it's worth. So that's it for now for sampling rates. I'm going to talk about bit depth now. When it comes to bit depth, in real life, because of thermal noise and a few other factors, we'll probably never be able to reach more than around 22 bits worth of performance. So 24 bits should be fine for recording. We do have some benefits over 16-bit, barely in real-world use, actually, when we're recording. But, you know, I don't think it takes that much more to do 24-bit, so I'm fine with that. As with higher sampling rates, though, there are benefits, and unlike sample rates, there can be massive benefits to processing at higher bit rates, and especially mixing at higher bit rates. But again, except for crappy DAWs and plugins, they do this internally with your 24-bit signals, and you don't really need to record at 32-bit or 64-bit or whatever, because like I said, you're probably never gonna pass the 22-bit performance rate. When you're running like, you know, 64-bit floats and whatever, there can be some benefits. I don't know if you've ever done a test where you purposely overload the mixer, and at 64-bit float, man, you're probably never really gonna really distort things, and especially, you know, you just remember to turn it back down before the output, right? Because that output is fixed, whatever it is, to your digital to analog converters, to your mix that you're sending off to, you know, your streaming service or MP3s or whatever. Just turn it back down. But internally to the DAW, you're probably never going to clip it unless it's a crappy old fixed point DAW. But I don't think you see very many of those anymore. And so, like when I was saying that religious aspect, there's people always thinking that there's some magical thing going on, and I know I constantly harp on that. But there was Peter. Peter, what's your last name? Peter Roos, I think, the film designer guy. He linked this, and this comes up from time to time. So this is Audio Bacon, and I don't know if this is a parody site, but I've seen this talked about for real. And honestly, Dave Pensato was pushing this stuff. I don't know, he's listened to his show, but I like it. I think he's a cool guy. Sorry, man, I'm really yawning out here. I'm really sorry about this. He pushes that, you know, the power cables that go to your amp. It's that kind of short 3, 4, 6 foot cable, whatever, that has the female end for going into your amplifiers, your computers, your mic preamps, whatever. Anything that has a good internal power supply. And then the other side plugs into your wall. So, you know, you've got miles and miles and miles of cable from the power plant to your house or to your studio, whatever. And then they're thinking that last 3 to 6 feet of cable coming from your wall to your actual unit is going to make some big giant difference. It's ridiculous across the board. But you know, if you spend $100 on what otherwise would have been a $5 cable, and I'm being sparing with the $100. Some of these go for crazy money. But anyway, there's a form of confirmation bias that, you know, some people call wallet confirmation bias. So if you spend a lot on it, you're gonna think that it sounds better. And sorry I'm saying so much. I'm not a professional presenter or whatever. This goes better when we have lots of other people on and we can talk about stuff. But if you pay a lot of money for something, like as you saw in our mic preamp test, if you pay $5,000 for a mic preamp instead of $50 for a mic preamp, you're going to think it sounds better, regardless of whether it actually measures better or not. And even on ABX tests, sometimes people hear this stuff. So they're claiming, and Dave Pensato, man, I'm sorry to have to call you out on this again, but he had a show one time, not too long ago, where they're all hearing this, and they're making claims about this. So anyway, so it's the last couple feet of cables. You hear it often. You'll hear this about mic cables, guitar cables, and there are situations where one could do better than other. But in general, it's all nonsense. So anyway, so here they went through a bunch of. Let's see what they say about this. I've spent the last 5 years auditioning and experimenting with over 1,000 audiophile cables. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. Depending on which power cables you use on which components, that could decide the balance of a sound system. No, unless they're broken. Sorry. I'm getting a wheeze that I don't want. Okay, so at this point, I'm sure we could all agree. Okay, I'm reading from this article. This isn't me saying this. At this point, I'm sure we could all agree that different power chords sound different. Okay, right there. No, we can't. Okay, if a power chord is working versus a power chord broken and not transmitting electricity, then yeah, they would sound different in that case because one would be making sounds and one wouldn't. But I would guarantee you, if we put an ABX test on this guy, he wouldn't be able to pick one of these from the other. This is crazy, unless it was broken again. So again, I'm going to say what he said again. Depending on which, I'm quoting here, depending on which power cables you use on which components, that could decide the balance of a sound system. Nope. At this point, I'm sure we could all agree that different power chords sound different. Nope. Even among generic chords, this is due to the variations in shielding, geometry, and materials. So he goes in and says some stuff that actually makes sense. But here you go. So one of the kryptonite to these audiophiles or gear sluts or, you know, all these people who believe that all this magical stuff, he says, blind tests are pointless for the same reason why the skeptics request them. Your mind is always playing tricks on you. Sorry. Blind tests are not pointless. And the reason the skeptics request them is because your mind plays tricks on you. Nice trying to flip the burden of proof here, but no. Blind tests would be good, but, you know, I don't even bother with blind tests until I find something that, until there's actually a phenomenon that's going to make some kind of difference. If you don't have a plausible mechanism of why something would act, why a phenomenon would occur, I'm probably not going to bother with it. But, you know, if I can measure that they're exactly the same in any of the tests that we actually care about, bandwidth, distortion, and signal to noise, and I measured both cables and they both do the same thing, I'm probably not going to mess with it. Oh, sorry again. Wow, really wiped out. But, you know, we could do a blind test and but see, you know, this is a total God of the gaps thing. You know, you'll always see this thing. Oh, you can't test God or whatever the claim is. You know, so these guys are going to hand wave away, you know, one of the most powerful things that could actually determine if there's something actually going on here. So, let's see. So he's got 27 different power cables, and he's going to talk about what they sound different. And you've heard on this show so many times before, you know, you're going to hear nonsense terms instead of measurements. They're going to talk about warmth and depth and forwardness of the sound, hardness of the sound, softness of the sound. You know, one guy's warmth is another guy's muddy, you know, so whatever. So is natural sound the best sound? So I'm quoting this again. You get a glimpse into the designer's ear when you listen to these power cables, as if they sound different and he's hearing different things so he can tell what the designer's thinking. For some, it's obvious they actually listen to live music. For others, they seem to use their measurement devices more or base it on their reference of what's enjoyable. Or they just hire a wire chef. This is so bonkers. As if it's going to sound different if the guy normally listens to live music. If these things, okay, first of all, I'm just going to say it. These things don't sound different. But if they sounded different, what he's saying is, you know, a live guy's probably, maybe he's lost all his high-end hearing, and so he's going to push that a lot more, or he doesn't care what the high end sounds like or whatever. This is such nonsense. But anyway, we're going to go on. I've heard over 100 audiophile power cables. So this is an audiophile site. So, of course, we're all going to make fun of them. Ha, ha, ha. But look, this isn't any different than when the music marketing machine talks about clocks sounding different or whatever else, and all these mic preamp claims. And yes, things are different, but lots of times they're not. Okay, I'm just going to try to get through this. I've heard over 100 audiophile power cables, and they all sound different in their own ways. No, they don't. Most of which don't sound natural to me at all. One thing to keep in mind is some people don't want natural. They're looking for a more surreal experience. Okay? Again, this phenomenon doesn't even exist. These things all sound the same. I'm just going to go out and say that. You can try and prove me wrong. I'm happy to engage in discussion with you about it, but they all sound the same. So this idea that some sound more natural than others, some sound whatever, more whatever than others, it's just crap. I mean, it really is. And it's true. Some people might want a more surreal experience. You're not going to get that from changing power cables. Okay, and I'm going to go on quote it again. And I've met plenty of these audiophiles. They know it's fantasy, but they enjoy sound more. Come to think of it, that was me at some point, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so are you admitting that they don't sound different? Man, you guys are all over the place. A year of listening. This survey of power cables has taken me about a year. I've postponed this evaluation due to the sheer amount of work and time it's required. Testing IC, speaker cables, and USB cables are a breeze in comparison. Okay, so this is one of those guys that maybe, I mean, there's people out there that claim that USB cables sound different. You know, if it's working, it's working. If it's broken, it doesn't work. That's the nice thing about digital. It's kind of an all or nothing kind of dichotomy, like a full-on binary thing. It's either is or it isn't. Let's see. I actually did some good testing to figure this out. So power cables involve keeping all cables constant and changing the one. So just changing one thing. Smart. Testing the effects on multiple components. Smart, again. System stress, powering up and powering down properly. Experimenting with different amplifiers and speakers. That's kind of redundant now compared because there's one other that said it. Experimenting with different volume levels. Trying out the different permutations and combinations. Redundant again. Multiple listening sessions due to break-in and settling time. Okay, here's another one. There's a lot of people who believe cables need to be broken in. So you can actually buy these like CDs and then just play it through the cable, and they say that shortens your breaking in time. If not, you know, you there's different formulas for breaking in. You know, play white noise for 48 hours or whatever. Multiple listening sessions make sense in the idea that you're also testing some things that might have broken or changed over time. Maybe you got a screwy tube. Also, your ears fool you. They're going to sound different at different times. So let's see. So he's talking about how people hear the same thing in different ways, which is smart. So let's just see. I'm trying to get to where you go. So approach and finding. After hundreds of hours of listening and percolating through over 200 pages of notes, there are a few themes that came forth. First, there isn't a best power cable for everyone. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to get through this. You'll most likely have to combine a bunch of different ones to get the right balance in the system. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't get through this. Okay, so he's saying that these power cables sound so different that maybe your power amp needs one type of power cable, your preamp needs a different type of power cable. This is, oh my God, sorry. Let me go back to quoting. So I found it best to consider the power cord as an ingredient rather than a component. Use these impressions as a guide on selecting the power cable that provides the best synergy for your system. Secondly, power cables tend to sound pretty consistent across different systems. Oh, wow. You don't say. I've determined this by analyzing subjective notes taken on cables that were tested months apart. I mention this because many find cable review is pointless due to system dependence. My findings suggest that there's more predictability than we think. Oh, of course there is. This is why we do ABX tests. This is why we do actual measurements of parameters that have measurements. Man, come on. You know, you listen to things at different times and think you're going to be able to compare them properly. We sit there and think that, all right, one of the things you'll see honest engineers tell you all the time is that they're mixing and they started tweaking their EQ and they thought, oh, well, this sounds much better. And then later on they go and look, they didn't even turn that EQ on. They were fooling themselves with their ears. You're not going to be able to hear things months apart and make a really substantial judgment to something that's super subtle. Look, you know this is subtle. If this effect even existed, this would be a super subtle one. Otherwise, stuff just wouldn't work. So get out of here with that. For that reason, I've included a notes section for each cable which contains the descriptors that were gathered from a word counter on my notes. The top descriptors I used over the years across multiple systems will be listed for each power cable. Okay, so here we go again. Lastly, I have to mention break-in and settling time. Yeah, I wasn't a believer either. A few of those cables sounded very different after a few hundred hours. Interestingly enough, it's only for those first hours. After more subsequent listens, and my notes were consistent again. For what it's worth, most of these power cables sounded the same out of the gate and never changed. You don't say. Funny that. Nevertheless, you can't rush judgments in the first few sessions. Now look, there are things that could make speaker cables or audio cables sound different over time, like if things were starting to break. But generally, they either work or they don't. Yeah, man. Okay. So he's talking about his setup. We've probably heard enough about that. Let me see. Oh boy, he's got piles of these cables. I just want to see the review here. Let me go back to the contents. So he goes through each of these cables. Let's just have a look at what he wants to talk about. So here's this Neotech NEP 3200. And this is a DIY cable. You probably solder it yourself or screw it together yourself. The price is $59 a foot for a power cable. Get out of here. If you want high performance without the high price tag, what? That's a high price tag. Get this thing, $59 a thing, $59 a foot. So let's see what he says with this sound. Okay, this cable at first sounded pretty bright. It was thin and a bit rough in the mid-range, a sound I completely didn't expect. Luckily, after 300-ish hours, it settled into its true form. If you don't believe in break-in, try building this cable. I don't believe you. There's something special about how this cable molds the music into 3D objects. Is there a objective measurement here? No. Just some word salad. Just from a density perspective, but one of smoothness and tone, the scale, gravity, and muscle this cable imparts are simply unmatched. It grips, but has an ease in the way it delivers music. It's also surprisingly quiet and focused. There's not a lot of bleeding, bloom, or blurring. Oh, what's the catch? Treble. Cymbal crashes are heavier and give off a duller shine. Also, the inner details and textural cues of voices are somewhat masked. In other words, the sound is more homogenized with more opaque skin over everything. It just solidifies everything with not a lot of air. As mentioned, using the FureTech FI50 NCFR connectors may help balance this out, but I haven't tried that yet. Regardless, the Neotech NEP 3200 sounds superb on amplifiers and active subwoofers, especially since a lot of hi-fi gear tends to tilt towards resolution and transparency. As a DIY project, this cable is very rewarding, and I believe most audiophiles will find a place for this cable somewhere in their stereo. This is just painful. So this is what you'll find in a lot of this stuff is they just they make word salad, and we use measurements. How many decibels is it? What's the bandwidth? How much distortion is it making? But you see all this like density, warmth. It's just hilarious. Dull shine. Inner details and textural cues. Yeah, no, thank you. Okay, so here's the one he mentioned. I want to see what it costs. The PureTech DPS4. So we don't literally have to talk about what all this nonsense that he writes about the density and whatever. I just want to get to the price here. PureTech DPS4 Alpha OCC cable, $450 a meter. Okay, $450 for a $3 cable. The terminals are $23 each for spade terminals. Okay, I don't know if you know what spade terminals are, but they're the ones you just kind of screw down into a component. You might still see these on car stereos and stuff. $23 a piece. They're usually a couple cents a piece, you know. Okay, so a male XLR plug, $99 each. If we needed good XLR plugs, we'd have them on all our gear. You know, let's not mince words. Go ahead and measure one. You'll find out. So female one. So this is the PureTech FP602 female R, high-end performance beryllium copper. You know, I'm sure there's some chemists and physicists out there that can tell me about that, but $117 each for a female XLR. Boy, Neutrik, you're in the wrong business. Switchcraft, you're in the wrong business. You guys got to learn how to fake all this. Okay, so IEC cable, $385 each. You know, this is total nonsense. You can buy their power distributor for $2,200. All right. Oh, okay. This is just nonsense. So I'm going to get to the final thoughts here. Let's just see what he had to say. These 27 power cords should cover a majority of the possible flavors when it comes to power cords. Again, I'm going to say they all sound the same. They're not going to be different flavors. Prove me wrong. Expensive doesn't always mean better, just different. The question is always how much you're willing to pay for that difference. This seems to be especially the case for over $2,000, where signatures can get pretty unique. No, they can't. Let's see, for the curious, let me get the biggest takeaway with this review was to actually spend time with the cable, at least a few days. When you binge on power cables, the context switching may alter your impressions. You don't say. You'll actually get further quicker if you resist the urge of constantly swapping in and out cables. Or you know what? Stick them on a switch so you can really tell. Or ABX them, you know. There were a few interesting discoveries made during this journey. I'd be interested to hear if anyone else has experienced something similar or different. Like the placebo effect. Okay. The majority of the power cables were tuned more neutrally. They're not tuned. They weren't tuned at all. They're not tuned, dude. Come on. Meaning an even amount of tonal color or energy across the spectrum. Hey, that's something you can measure. Energy across the spectrum, let's see it. Nothing too warm.